Rodney Alcala, born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala, on August 23, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas. He was the third child of 4 children born to Mexican-American couple Raul Alcala Bucher and Ana Maria Gutierrez. Alcala's father moved the family to Mexico in 1951, and then he abandoned them 3 years later. In 1954, when he was 11 years old, Alcala's mother moved him and his 2 sisters to suburban Los Angeles. Alcala was an academically gifted student who was reasonably popular among his peers, and he was supported by his family. He attended various private schools in the Los Angeles area during his youth and graduated from Cantwell Sacred Heart of Mary High School, where he was on the yearbook planning committee and on the track and cross-country teams. In 1961, at the age of 17, Alcala joined the United States Army to become a paratrooper and served as a clerk. During his service, Alcala was noted for being extremely manipulative, vindictive, and insubordinate, and he was disciplined on several occasions for assaulting young women. In 1964, after what was described as a nervous breakdown during which he went AWOL and hitchhiked from Fort Bragg in North Carolina to his mother's house in California, Alcala was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is a personality disorder defined by a chronic pattern of behavior that disregards the rights and well-being of others. People with ASPD often exhibit behavior that conflicts with social norms, leading to issues with interpersonal relationships, employment, and legal matters. The condition generally manifests in childhood or early adolescence, with a high rate of associated conduct problems and a tendency for symptoms to peak in late adolescence and early adulthood. Alcala was estimated to have an IQ of 135 by military psychiatrists, which is very high. He was subsequently discharged from the Army on medical grounds. Other diagnoses later proposed by various psychiatric experts at his trials included narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, which is defined as a personality disorder characterized by a pervasive, long-term pattern of significant interpersonal relationship instability, acute fear of abandonment, and intense emotional outbursts. People with BPD frequently exhibit self-harming behaviors and engage in risky activities, primarily caused by difficulties in regulating emotions. Symptoms such as dissociation, a pervasive sense of emptiness, and distorted sense of self are prevalent. He was also diagnosed with malignant narcissism with psychopathy and sexual sadism comorbidities. After being discharged from the Army, Alcala graduated from the UCLA School of the Arts and Architecture. It was later claimed that he studied film under Roman Polanski at New York University, NYU. But this is not true, and he never met Polanski during his time at NYU. While his academic life was going well, his mental health was deteriorating and his sexual desires were becoming more depraved by the minute, and he couldn't hold his desires in anymore. On September 25, 1968, a passing motorist named Donald Haynes called police after witnessing Alcala lure Tali Shapiro, aged 8, into his Hollywood apartment. Shapiro, who was residing at the Chateau Marmont with her family, was approached by Alcala on her way to school when he pulled up beside her in his car and asked if she needed a ride. Shapiro initially refused, but when she heard him say that he knew her parents, she got into his car. Alcala then took her to his apartment, where he told Shapiro he wanted to show her a picture. When the police arrived, Shapiro was found alive in a pool of her own blood, having been raped and beaten with a steel bar. Alcala had fled. Shapiro was in a coma for 32 days and spent months in recovery. To evade the arrest warrant stemming from the Shapiro assault, Alcala left California and enrolled at NYU, using the name John Berger. Cornelia Crilly, a 23-year-old Trans World Airlines flight attendant, was found raped and murdered in her Manhattan apartment on June 12, 1971. Alcala had strangled her with her own nylon stockings, leaving her dead in her apartment at 427 East 83rd Street. It is believed that Crilly met Alcala as she moved into her new apartment, and she accepted his help in moving some furniture. Her murder remained unsolved until 2011. In 1971, Alcala obtained a job at a New Hampshire arts camp as a counselor for children using a slightly different alias, John Berger. The FBI added Alcala to its list of 10 most wanted fugitives in early 1971. A few months later, 2 campers at the arts camp noticed his photo on an FBI poster at the post office. That August, Alcala was arrested and extradited to California. By then, Tali Shapiro's parents had relocated their entire family to Mexico and refused to allow Shapiro to testify at the trial. Without their primary witness, prosecutors were unwilling to charge Alcala with rape and attempted murder. He was instead convicted of child molestation, then a lesser charge, and sentenced to 3 years. Alcala was paroled in 1974 after 34 months. Less than 2 months after his release, Alcala was rearrested and convicted for assaulting a 13-year-old girl identified in court records as Julie J., who had accepted what she thought would be a ride to school. Alcala was again paroled after serving 2 years, and released in 1977 as a registered sex offender. After Alcala's second release in 1977, his Los Angeles parole officer made the unusual choice of permitting a repeat offender, and known flight risk, to travel to New York City. New York Police Department investigators now believe that a week after returning to Manhattan, Alcala killed Ellen Jane Hover, 23-year-old daughter of nightclub owner Herman Hover and goddaughter of Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Hover was last seen at her New York apartment on July 15, 1977. Her datebook showed that she had an appointment to meet with one, John Berger, that same day. Later in 1977, the FBI received a tip about Alcala's 1971 arrest in New Hampshire, related to the Shapiro case in California. Alcala admitted under questioning to knowing Hover, but investigators could not arrest him, since they had not found her body. Her remains were discovered in 1978 buried under heavy rocks on a hillside overlooking the Hudson River, near a location on the John D. Rockefeller estate, where an aspiring model would later report that Berger had taken photos of her. In 1977, Alcala worked briefly at the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter, and was interviewed by members of the Hillside Strangler Task Force as part of their investigation of known sex offenders. Although Alcala was ruled out as the strangler, he was arrested and served a brief sentence for marijuana possession. During this period, Alcala convinced hundreds of young men and women that he was a professional fashion photographer and took pictures of them for his portfolio. A Times coworker later recalled that Alcala shared his photos with workmates. "I thought it was weird, but I was young. I didn't know anything," she said. When I asked why he took the photos, he said their moms asked him to. "I remember the girls were naked." Leanne Leadham, who was 17 when Alcala photographed her in 1979, reported that, "He said he was a professional, so in my mind I was being a model for him." Leadham further reported that the portfolio Alcala shared with her also included spread after spread of naked teenage boys. In 1978, in the midst of his killing spree, Alcala was a contestant on the popular game show The Dating Game. Host Jim Lang introduced him as a successful photographer. Between takes you might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Jed Mills, a fellow Bachelor contestant on the episode, later described Alcala as very obnoxious and creepy, and a standout creepy guy in my life. Alcala won the competition, and a date with the episode's bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, who subsequently refused to go out with him because she found him creepy. Here's a part of that show.
Well, let's see. Bachelor number one is a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Have fun playing tennis. Thank you. Rodney, thank you. Okay. You can go relax, meet each other, say hello, get acquainted, and they'll be back. And before we begin our next game, let's find out what runners-up will receive today from Johnny Jacobs. John?
On November 9, 1977, Alcala murdered Jill Terry Barkham, an 18-year-old girl from Oneida, New York, and disposed of her body on a dirt path near Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. Barkham was found in a knee-to-chest position and naked from the waist down. There were signs of sexual assault, and she had been strangled with a pair of blue rope ties and beaten. She also had 3 bite marks on her right breast. Initially, authorities believed Barkham was a victim of the Hillside Strangler. However, after the arrests of Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono, either of whom confessed to or was convicted of her murder, authorities determined that her case was unrelated. On December 16, 1977, 27-year-old nurse Georgia Marie Wickstead was discovered dead in her Malibu apartment. She was last seen when she drove another nurse, Barbara Gale, home from a bar. When Wickstead did not show up for work the next day, Gale and their co-workers reported her missing. Police arrived at Wickstead's apartment to find signs of forced entry. Wickstead was posed naked on her bedroom floor, strangled with her nylons. She had been sexually assaulted, her skull had been bashed in and her genitals had been mutilated. Prosecutors later used DNA evidence and a handprint found at the scene to convict Alcala. On June 24, 1978, Charlotte Lee Lamb, a 32-year-old legal secretary from Santa Monica, was found dead in the laundry room of the apartment complex where she was living in El Segundo. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten and strangled with a shoelace and was posed with her hands behind her back. DNA at the scene would match that of Alcala, and DNA on a pair of earrings found in his storage locker after Robin Christine Samso's 1979 murder would eventually prove to match Lamb's DNA. On February 14, 1979, Alcala picked up 15-year-old hitchhiker Monique Hoyt in Riverside County. He drove Hoyt to his apartment, where he raped her. They then traveled to a secluded mountainous area in Joshua Tree, California, where Alcala took photos of her in her underwear, as well as photos of him raping her once again. He bound and gagged her and began a sustained assault, which included further rape and sodomy. Alcala bludgeoned Hoyt in the head with a rock, but Hoyt escaped when Alcala entered a gas station bathroom on the drive back to Riverside County. Hoyt filed a police report about her attack, and Alcala was arrested, but his mother posted his bail. On June 13, 1979, Jill Marie Parento, a 21-year-old computer key-punch operator, left work early to go to a baseball game. When she did not make it to work the following morning, police went to her Burbank apartment and found signs of forced entry. Parento was dead, naked on her bathroom floor. She was posed with pillows under her shoulders. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten and strangled. Her killer cut himself crawling through a window, and blood evidence would later identify Alcala as the perpetrator. Parento's friend, Catherine Bryant, testified that she and Parento had met Alcala at a club several times before. On June 20, 1979, Robin Christine Samso, a 12-year-old girl from Huntington Beach, disappeared as she rode a borrowed bicycle from her Huntington Beach home to her ballet class. Her decomposing body was found 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills. dumped off Santa Anita Canyon Road. She had been beaten, raped, and stabbed with a knife. Samso's friends told police that a stranger had approached them on the beach asking to take their pictures. Detectives circulated a sketch of the photographer, and Alcala's parole officer recognized him. Alcala was arrested in July 1979 and held without bail. He went on trial for Samso's murder, was found guilty in May 1980 and sentenced to death in June. However, the verdict was overturned by the California Supreme Court in 1984 because jurors had been improperly informed of his prior sex crimes. In May 1986, after a second trial virtually identical to the first except for omission of the prior criminal record testimony, he was again convicted and sentenced to death in August. In 1992, the California Supreme Court upheld the verdict, but Alcala filed a federal habeas corpus petition, and in 2001, a United States District Court judge granted it, overturning Alcala's second conviction. That decision was upheld in 2003 by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals panel, in part because a witness was not allowed to support Alcala's contention that the park ranger who found Samso's body had been hypnotized by police investigators. While preparing for their third prosecution in 2003, Orange County investigators learned that Alcala's DNA, sampled under a new state law over his objections, matched semen left at the rape-murder scenes of two women in Los Angeles. Additional evidence, including another cold case DNA match in 2004, led to Alcala's indictment for the murders of 4 additional women. Jill Barkham, 18, a New York runaway found, rolled up like a ball, in a Los Angeles ravine in 1977, and originally thought to have been a victim of the Hillside Strangler. Georgia Wickstead, 27, bludgeoned in her Malibu apartment in 1977. Charlotte Lamb, 31, raped, strangled and left in the laundry room of her El Segundo apartment complex in 1978. And Jill Parento, 21, killed in her Burbank apartment in 1979. All of the bodies were found, posed, in carefully chosen positions. Another pair of earrings found in Alcala's Seattle storage locker had residue that matched Lamb's DNA. During his incarceration between the second and third trials, Alcala wrote and self-published a book, You, the Jury, in which he claimed innocence in the Samso case and suggested a different suspect. He also filed 2 lawsuits against the California penal system for a slip-and-fall incident and for refusing to provide him a low-fat diet. In 2003, prosecutors entered a motion to join the Samso charges with those of the 4 newly discovered victims. Alcala's attorneys contested it. As one of them explained, "If you're a juror and you hear one murder case, you may be able to have reasonable doubt, but it's very hard to say you have reasonable doubt on all 5, especially when 4 of the 5 aren't alleged by eyewitnesses but are proven by DNA matches." In 2006, the California Supreme Court ruled in the prosecution's favor, and in February 2010, Alcala stood trial on the 5 joint charges. For the third trial, Alcala elected to act as his own attorney. He took the stand in his own defense, and for 5 hours played the roles of both interrogator and witness, asking himself questions and addressing himself as Mr. Alcala, in a deeper than normal voice, followed by answering them. During this self-questioning and answering session, he told jurors, often in a rambling monotone, that he was at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a job as a photographer at the time Samso was kidnapped. He showed the jury a portion of his 1978 appearance on The Dating Game in an attempt to prove that the earrings found in his Seattle locker were his, not Samso's. Jed Mills, the actor who competed against Alcala on the show, told a reporter that earrings were not yet a socially acceptable accoutrement for men in 1978. "I had never seen a man with an earring in his ear," he said. "I would have noticed them on him. Alcala made no significant attempt to dispute the 4 added charges, other than to assert that he could not remember killing any of the women. As part of his closing argument, he played the Arlo Guthrie song, Alice's Restaurant, in which the protagonist tells the psychiatrist that he wants to kill. After less than 2 days, the jury convicted him on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. A surprise witness during the penalty phase of the trial was Shapiro. Richard Rappaport, a psychiatrist paid by Alcala and the only defense witness, testified that borderline personality disorder could explain Alcala's claims that he had no memory of committing the murders. The prosecutor argued that Alcala was a sexual predator who knew what he was doing was wrong and didn't care. In March 2010, Alcala was sentenced to death for a 3rd time. After his 2010 conviction, New York authorities announced that they would no longer pursue Alcala because of his status as a convict awaiting execution. Nevertheless, in January 2011, a Manhattan grand jury indicted him for the murders of Crilly and Hoover in 1971 and 1977. In June 2012, he was extradited to New York, where he initially entered not guilty pleas on both counts. In December 2012, he changed both pleas to guilty, citing a desire to return to California to pursue appeals of his death penalty conviction. On January 7, 2013, a Manhattan judge sentenced Alcala to an additional 25 years to life. In March 2010, the Huntington Beach, California and New York City police departments released 120 of Alcala's photographs and sought the public's help in identifying them in the hope of determining if any of the women and children he photographed were additional victims. Approximately 900 additional photos could not be made public, police said, because they were too sexually explicit. In the first few weeks, police reported that approximately 21 women had come forward to identify themselves, and at least 6 families said they believed they recognized loved ones who disappeared years ago and were never found. None of the photos was unequivocally connected to a missing person case or unsolved murder until 2013. 110 of the original photos remain posted online, and police continue to solicit the public's help with further identifications. Most of the subjects remain unidentified. Police fear that some of the subjects may be additional cold case victims. Following Alcala's death in 2021, 68-year-old Morgan Rowan contacted Steve Hodel, one of the original investigators on the Shapiro case, and described being attacked by Alcala in July 1968, when she was 16. Rowan claimed that while she was living in Hollywood, she was approached by Alcala at a teen nightclub on the Sunset Strip and entered his car believing he would be driving to an IHOP restaurant. Instead, Alcala drove to his apartment a few blocks away, where he said he was having a party. When they arrived, Alcala dragged Rowan into his bedroom, barred the door, and then beat and raped her. Rowan was rescued by friends and acquaintances who broke into the room through a window. Alcala fled, and Rowan was pulled from the apartment by her friends. In March 2011, investigators in Marin County, California, north of San Francisco, announced that they were confident that Alcala was responsible for the October 9, 1977, murder of 19-year-old Pamela Jean Pam Lamson, who disappeared after making a trip to Fisherman's Wharf to meet a man who had offered to photograph her. Her battered, naked body was subsequently found in Marin County near a hiking trail. With no fingerprints or usable DNA, charges were never filed, but police claimed that there was sufficient evidence to convince them that Alcala committed the crime. In September 2016, Alcala was charged with the murder of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thornton. Thornton and her lover moved away from her family to live in San Antonio, Texas. After they split up in Biloxi, Mississippi, in June 1977, She was last seen hitchhiking and was never heard from again. In 2013, an image made public by Huntington Beach PD and NYPD of a dark-haired woman riding a motorcycle while wearing a yellow shirt was recognized by Thornton's sister. Her body was found in 1982 near Granger, Wyoming, approximately 6 miles from Interstate 80, but was not identified until 2015 when DNA supplied by Thornton's relatives matched tissue samples from her remains. Alcala admitted taking the photo, but not to killing the woman, who was approximately 6 months pregnant at the time of her death. Thornton is the first alleged murder victim linked to the Alcala photos made public in 2010. The 73-year-old Alcala was reportedly too ill to make the journey from California to Wyoming to stand trial on the new charges. While on California's death row, Alcala died of a heart attack at a hospital in Kings County on July 24, 2021, at age 77. This is one of the most disturbing 6 serial killers to ever exist. I think everybody can sleep better knowing that this freak is now dead. If you liked the video, comment down below what topics would you like me to go over next, and don't forget to subscribe and like to help the channel.